In 1976, a young Japanese cardiologist arrived on the island of Okinawa with a bag full of medical forms and the full confidence of modern medicine behind him. His name was Makoto Suzuki. He had heard that Okinawa had the oldest population in Japan. He came to study disease. He expected to find patients, charts full of diagnoses, medications, cardiovascular complications. What he found instead stopped him completely. The patients were not sick. Men and women in their 80s, 90s, 100s. Clean arteries, stable glucose, no medication, no decline. These were not exceptional cases. This was simply normal. This was just how people aged in Okinawa. Makoto Suzuki did not go back to the mainland. He stayed for 40 years. He founded the Okinawa Centenarian Study, examining more than 1,000 people who had lived past 100. What he documented across 4 decades changed how researchers around the world understood the relationship between daily habits and biological aging. In the next 12 minutes, you are going to learn exactly what he found. 3 practices. And at the end, the one variable Suzuki said surprised him more than anything else in 40 years of research. The one he did not expect to matter as much as it did. When Suzuki began interviewing centenarians, he found a pattern so consistent it was almost impossible to ignore. These people were not managing their health. They were not following protocols. They had simply never stopped doing what their culture had always done. And those things were systematically addressing the 3 biological processes that accelerate aging after 60. Chronic inflammation, oxidative stress, blood glucose instability. In the United States, doctors manage all 3 with prescription medications. The average American over 65 takes 5 or more drugs daily to control conditions that the centenarians of Okinawa never developed in the first place. The difference was not genetics. When Okinawans emigrated to Brazil and adopted a Western diet, their longevity advantage disappeared within 2 generations. When American fast food arrived on the island, Okinawa dropped from first place in Japan for male life expectancy to 26th place in less than a decade. The food changed. The genes did not. The outcomes changed completely. What Suzuki documented was not destiny. It was a daily practice, which meant it could be lost and it could be rebuilt. The first practice Suzuki identified was built around a single food that made up the majority of the traditional Okinawan diet for most of the 20th century. The purple sweet potato, called imo in Okinawan dialect. Before rice became widely available, imo accounted for roughly 69% of daily calories. Not as a side dish, as the main food of every meal. The specific variety grown in Okinawa, deep purple, not the orange type common in Western supermarkets, is dense with anthocyanins, the same class of antioxidant compounds found in blueberries and red grapes, but in concentrations significantly higher than almost any other food in the traditional Okinawan diet. The purple sweet potato has a glycemic index of around 44. White bread sits at 75. Every time you eat a high glycemic carbohydrate, you trigger a blood sugar spike. That spike triggers inflammation. That inflammation, repeated thousands of times over years, is how cardiovascular disease and cognitive decline build quietly in the background. A 2021 study in the journal Nutrients found that regular consumption of purple sweet potato significantly reduced C-reactive protein, the primary blood marker of systemic inflammation, in adults over 50. The practical version is simple. Replace your morning carbohydrate with a medium sweet potato, boiled or baked. Add a tablespoon of olive oil. The fat-soluble antioxidants require fat to be absorbed. Without it, you get a fraction of the benefit. In the first week, you will likely notice a steadier energy curve through the morning. Less of the drop that hits 90 minutes after a high-carb breakfast. That is the first signal the system is working. This is 30% of what Suzuki documented. The second practice is where his research became counterintuitive. In a population eating a high-carbohydrate diet every day, Suzuki needed to understand how Okinawan elders maintained near-normal fasting glucose levels into their 80s and 90s. The answer was a vegetable almost nobody in the Western world eats regularly: bitter melon, called Goya in Okinawan. You have been told that managing blood sugar means reducing carbohydrates. That is the standard Western approach. That is not what Okinawa shows us. Okinawans ate plenty of carbohydrates. They did not restrict them. They regulated them with a specific food containing compounds that behave in the body similarly to insulin. Without the prescription, without the side effects, Goya contains at least 3 active compounds: carotene, lysine, and polypeptide P that directly improve glucose uptake in cells. A study published in the Journal of Ethnopharmacology compared bitter melon to metformin, one of the most prescribed diabetes medications in the world. Bitter melon produced comparable reductions in HbA1c. With a vegetable, the traditional preparation is Goya champuru, bitter melon stir-fried with tofu, egg, and soy sauce. 15 minutes, 2 to 3 servings per week. That is the documented consumption pattern in the centenarian households Suzuki studied. If you have never eaten bitter melon, the taste is exactly what the name suggests: genuinely bitter. The trick used in every Okinawan kitchen is simple: slice it thin, salt it for 10 minutes, then rinse. This removes most of the bitterness while leaving the active compounds intact. After that, stir-fry it with firm tofu and a beaten egg. The bitterness almost disappears into the dish. What remains is one of the most metabolically protective meals you can put together in under 20 minutes. The modern trap is immediate. You hear about Goya's benefits and buy a capsule. But the centenarians did not take bitter melon extract. They ate it as food, as a meal. The food matrix, the fiber, the way it was digested alongside other whole foods, changes how these compounds interact with the gut. The extract removes all of that. If you are finding this useful, subscribe to Longevity Code. Every week we go this deep on one place, one person, one complete system. Always backed by real research, always with something you can start this week. No supplements to sell, no products to push, just the code. We now have the foundation and the amplifier. What comes next is the variable Suzuki said he did not fully appreciate until late in his research. Suzuki spent the first decade of the study focused on diet and biomarkers. But at some point he noticed something consistent in the way centenarians structured their days that had nothing to do with food. Every single one had a moai. The word describes a group of people you are committed to for life. In traditional Okinawan culture, children were placed into groups of 5 or 6 early in life. Those groups met regularly, shared resources in times of difficulty, celebrated together, and stayed together for decades. Some moai Suzuki documented had been meeting weekly for over 70 years. In 2010, Julianne Holt-Lundstad at Brigham Young University published a meta-analysis covering more than 300,000 individuals. People with strong social connections had a 50% lower risk of early death compared to socially isolated people. 50%. Larger than smoking, larger than obesity, larger than physical inactivity. Your body does not distinguish between social threat and physical threat. Isolation produces the same cortisol elevation, the same immune suppression, the same chronic inflammation that processed food does, through a completely different pathway, arriving at exactly the same biological destination. The centenarians Suzuki studied were not socially active because they were healthy. The social structure kept the inflammatory environment of their bodies stable for decades. Their cortisol baseline stayed low, and the food practices, the IMO, the Goya, were almost always practiced communally. Meals prepared together, eaten together. The food and the social structure arrived as a single system. What the data kept pointing to was something Suzuki had not expected to measure when he arrived in 1976. The biological protection he was documenting in blood panels could be traced back again and again to the consistency of human connection over time. Not diet alone, not movement alone. The whole system working together. The modern version of the moai does not require an Okinawan village. It requires a commitment to regular, consistent, face-to-face contact with the same people over time. Not a group chat, not a follow on social media. A fixed recurring moment, a weekly dinner, a standing walk, a coffee every Thursday, with real people you are genuinely accountable to. The consistency is the mechanism. Showing up once is pleasant. Showing up every week for 20 years is what changes your telomeres. At the beginning of this video, I told you I would reveal the one thing that surprised Makoto Suzuki most in 40 years of research. It was not the purple sweet potato. It was not the bitter melon. It was not the genetics or the climate. It was this. The centenarians of Okinawa did not think about longevity. Not one of them. They were not optimizing anything. They were eating the same food their mothers had cooked, meeting the same people they had known for 70 years, stopping when they were no longer hungry, moving because there were things that needed doing. They were not trying to live long. They were just living well. And the biology followed. Think about how much energy the modern world spends trying to reverse aging. Supplements, protocols, biohacking stacks, continuous glucose monitors. Then consider people who reached 100 in better cardiovascular health than most 50-year-old Americans, without ever once thinking about any of it. The system is three things. Tier 1, a purple sweet potato in the morning to anchor your glucose. Tier 2, bitter melon with tofu 2 or 3 times a week to regulate what the sweet potato cannot do alone. Tier 3, a moai, a fixed group of people you meet consistently, not because you scheduled a wellness activity, but because you built a structure that makes showing up the default. Your action today is one thing. Find one person you have not spoken to in more than 2 weeks. Call them. Make a plan to meet regularly. That is the beginning of a moai. That is Tier 3, Day 1. If you want the complete systems from Sardinia, Icaria, Nicoya, and Loma Linda, subscribe to Longevity Code. Every week, one place, one person, one practice, the longest living people on Earth have been using for generations, and the science that finally explains why. No supplements, no products, just the code. Leave me one comment. Do you have a group of people you see consistently, every week? The same people, the same time? Because according to 40 years of Okinawan data, your answer to that question matters more than almost anything else on your plate.